This podcast contains strong language and examples of real-life scenarios that some may find disturbing. It is intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Our guest today is Ryan Wilson, who was a soldier and Combat Assault Dog handler with one of Australia's elite special operations units. While we chat, Ryan and myself are sampling some whiskey from Whippersnapper Distillery right here in Perth. Ryan is drinking the Upshot and I am drinking the wheat whiskey. This interview is a rare insight into what goes on inside a special operations unit, and I hope that you enjoy listening to it as much as I did speaking to Ryan about it. I'm Jace Kelly, and this is the Virtus House Kennel Cast.
Where we left off last episode was where you had just kind of not graduated, but you kind of passed course and you were moving into the cell, into the squadron from the cell. That's not always a smooth transition, so let's talk about that.
No, it's not always a smooth transition, and you know that's because with all training in the regiment, you know, you get sort of stock standard training, and then you go to your squadron, and certain influences from people with a lot of experience, you know, then impart their knowledge on you, and things change. So wasn't uncommon, you know, with CQB, with anything we did where squadrons differed in the way they did things. And the same thing went down with the dogs. So, you know, I left the cell, off course.
And you'd all been trained exactly the same way?
Yeah, you know, and there was everyone, you know, from different squadrons, and we'd all received the exact same training.
Yep.
You know, and then I went back to the squadron, and so this one had Beef Barclay as the
Dave Barclay, yep.
Yeah,
yep.
Sorry, as the senior handler. Matt Hart was there. So
you were the junior.
I was junior,
and Matt's kind of like, he's on his way. He's just doing his dog handling, but he's on his way to being the lead handler. That's basically how it works.
Yeah, you sort of progress through.
Yep.
So that was where I was at, and it was myself and another guy, Matty Martin. I think it was. I'm sure he's not. He'll be all right. Me mentioning him.
He's all right.
Yeah, he's out. But
okay. He's a legend.
Yeah. So and he had Striker, I think.
He did eventually. He had a young dog.
Oh, Django.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just so everyone knows, Django couldn't get over gunfire. He had issues with gunfire. And could not get past that.
That's
so he
right,
was killing it on every other part of the course, but could not get over gunfire. So
yeah, that's right.
I he got swapped out for Striker.
And Striker, yeah, that's right. So yeah, it was us on call. In the squadron with Matt and Dave. Things changed a little bit. So you know, we'd been taught a certain way, and then now we got introduced to another way of doing things based off Dave's and Matt's experiences overseas, and you know, so
which is important, eh? Like that's
super important.
Operational tempo will always trump everything, hey?
For sure. And you know, we were never gonna say, oh, but this is what we were taught on course, you know.
Yep.
But course, like, and this is what I sort of understood later, retrospectively, was what you get taught on course is your really foundation.
Yep.
You know, and then you build on that, and you just don't know what you don't know at that time. But yeah, so I got introduced to a few different ways of doing things with 3 Squadron, and you know, it was good. You know, I had a lot of experience there in the squadron.
Yeah.
Overseas experience. So I just sort of lapped it up and took on board everything I could.
So took it all on board. Was there a disconnect between what you'd learned? Obviously, later on, you realised that the course is just setting you up with a foundation. But at the time, I would imagine that you thought that was the way things were done. So was there much of a disconnect between moving to that next stage, or was it a pretty smooth transition?
Oh, I think it's different for everyone that went through it. But yeah, I mean, at the time, like I said, you don't really know what you don't know. And all I knew was what I was taught on course.
Mm-hmm.
So that was what I used. And then, being exposed to sort of different training methods or scenarios and, based off Dave's experience, based off Matt's experience, based off
Which is quite numerous. Like it's
and then based off their personalities too.
Yep.
Because they had quite different personalities.
Yep, chalk and
so
cheese.
they would, the scenarios or serials that, Dave would set up completely different to what Matt would set up.
Mm-hmm.
Both very valuable.
Yep.
Just you would be...
Does that come down to experience, really, on varied experience on their parts, what they saw?
Yeah, for sure. I can imagine. I can't talk for them, but I can only imagine it's based off what experiences they went through or and their dog career. But so at the time, again, I was kind of like a senior person in the regiment now, but as a trooper, I was still a trooper. My career progression was quite slow, but as most people who know me would know that. But in the dog world, I was back to square one. You were back to being a rookie again. You just sort of...
How do you cope with that though? So on one hand, you're this experienced operator. On the other, you're a novice. How does that work?
Yeah, and I mean that's it's all about ego.
Yeah,
and I think that's where you need to have your ego in check and just be able to go, well, I really don't know this field, or and to be honest, dogs have a very good way of checking your ego and making you realise you don't know what you're doing when you've got a dog. So to me, that wasn't really a problem. I was able to say, I've done multiple tours or whatnot, got experience in other areas, but dogs, I'm not 100% sure. I think the biggest check, like I mentioned when I first started the course, was I kind of thought I was, from the experience, I kind of thought, how hard can it be?
Yep.
And then that was a big ego check. Mm-hmm. That was like the moment I went, all right, you don't know shit. Yeah. So
that must be, that can be a struggle, hey?
It is.
Yeah.
It is, and I think that's a whole nother topic, to be honest, like on the culture of failure, within the regiment or within society in general.
Sure.
Something, personally I struggle with is that, we don't want to be considered a failure or, things like that. But, it is really all about ego and being able to check it and without being seen as a sign of weakness, so to speak. So, it's difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to explain for those that haven't been exposed to this environment, it can be it's a very niche environment. It's very alpha, we click as a group, we move forward together. Any kind of weak link or crink in the armor needs to be pushed aside, kind of thing. And that can be difficult because you've got to kind of process that on your own rather than...
but I think the regiment, the training philosophy that has come a long way.
Yeah.
And I think they're a lot more open now to... failure and learning and using failure as a way of learning.
Yeah.
Whereas I think, during my early time and it could be a lot of it self-imposed, but,
sure.
I was so afraid of failure that I would avoid doing things I knew I wasn't good at or, I had the possibility of, failing at because I just didn't want to risk it. So, Yeah. Whereas I think now,
Well, that's a dog handler thing, hey? So
yeah, true.
I see that across the dog realm. People, when a dog team is good at something, they will hammer at it.
Yeah.
When they're not good at something, they will avoid doing it so that they don't come unstuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I've seen it, and I've been there. I've been that dog handler.
Yeah.
And that's something that you only sort of recognise in retrospect, and then you actively try and change it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is a big issue, but I think the culture of the regiment's come a long way in that respect. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It is funny how the dog community reflects your operator community.
Yeah.
To a large extent, like
because and let's be honest, the dog community is very small.
yeah, it is
Like very very
Tiny.
small community. Yeah. So
yeah. But it is across the board. I've worked with a lot of agencies now through you guys, with police and other military organisations and other organisations around the world, and the story is the same.
yeah, it's all the same.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, hey? Like completely opposite ends of the earth, yet we're doing the exact same
Have the
things.
same issues. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. All right, so you're out there, you're in the squadron. Beef's your lead handler. Scurry's kind of like the intermittent good, the experienced operator. And you're now integrating Canny into the squadron. How does that go?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's really welcoming of the dog, and Kenny became, a bit of a mascot for K Troop at the time, and everyone, like I said, it was really hard to hate or dislike Kenny.
Yeah.
So and at that time we had him in the office, we had him everywhere. We just integrating him with the boys, getting him used to everything. So they just become another team member.
Okay. Is that how other guys look at it? They look at them as operators as well?
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of the operators, especially the ones with overseas experience in that, would 100% see him as another operator.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. So let's talk training, dog training. So you've got Dave, and we kind of talked about it. Dave and Matt are kind of leading the way. But obviously it's very squadron-centric now. Are you kind of meeting new training obstacles that you didn't come up against in the cell, or varied, or?
Yeah, 100% new obstacles, because there's only so much you can be exposed to on the course, right, with your dog. Like I said, it's the beginning, it's the foundation of what you'll build up from. And then when you get to the squadron, now you're doing much more complex and complicated activities with the dog. So now you're expected to do a lot of things. You're expected, with your insertion, you're expected with your, I don't know, like a lot of different sort of activities that we do as operators. You're expected to do it with a dog, which, again, you're not exposed to a lot on the course because time and resources. But so there's then there's new challenges that we need to work. And I know that on the one example, when helicopters, right? Like we didn't have the access to helicopters during the course, so Kenny wasn't exposed to helicopters. And then in the squadron, Black Hawks came over and we got him. So then, that was one challenge I had to deal with, was getting him introduced to helicopters,
And keeping the squadron happy.
Yeah, right.
The task.
Yeah. So trying not to interrupt training, because we only have the helicopters for a specific time period, and so you don't want to interrupt. But I can't just grab Kenny and chuck him on a helicopter for the first time, because he's never experienced it. He's never seen one. He needs to be built up to it. He needs to be around it. He needs to then go up and come down. Or, there's a progression. As you know, that to get them introduced to that kind of capability. And that was a balancing act to try and convince people to say, I can't just grab him and let's go and then we're going to deploy and do a mission or something like that. Like it was difficult. So I need, he hasn't been on a helicopter before. I need to expose him to it. So that was a challenge. And yeah, it was an interesting challenge because, the first time he didn't really know what was going on. And as soon as we hit the rotor wash, he just sort of turned around and decided, nah, this isn't for him. Didn't want a bar of it.
And just so everyone knows, that can be really confronting for a dog.
Yeah.
There is a lot of downwards pressure going on.
Yeah.
And yeah, we can understand it as humans, but in a dog's brain, he doesn't know what is going on.
No.
So it's understandable.
It took a while to get him used to being around helicopters. So I had to start playing with the Kong with him just maybe 300-400 meters from a helicopter as it started up, get him used to the noise.
Linking that positive.
Linking it, yep. So he's got the Kong and then eventually get him closer and then under the rotor wash playing with the ball. But, there's only so much. Eventually, I just had to get him on there because he just didn't like that rotor wash. So I got him on, and in the end, Kenny he did lots of jobs on helicopters, but he knew he just didn't like it.
Yeah, right.
So he knew, and that as soon as he saw a helicopter, his safest place was under the seat, on board under the seat. So he would just take off. I'd let him off lead, and as the boys were sort of moving towards the helicopter, I'd let him off lead, and he would run and jump on and just get under the seat real quick to get his spot. So
that's important as a handler to adjust to what the dog is telling you. Hey?
Yeah, well, he just really did not like the downwash and didn't like he knew he had to get on.
Yep.
He knew that was part of it, but he didn't want to. But he had a safe place, I guess, under the seat. So, and the boys all knew that, and they were happy. They'd be like, "Yep, there's Kenny under the seat. Good to go." So, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, it's all about adjusting to what the dog's telling you. Hey?
Yeah.
Like, you could have forced him.
Nah.
That would have sent you backwards as a team.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. It's difficult. It's listening to what the dog's saying, but also, the dog, giving them a bit more credit. Like, they are smart. They do know. Like, he knew in the end that this wasn't something he enjoyed, but he had to do it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. So, obviously choppers, and then there's things like, I would imagine, like CQB, which would throw up some, like obviously you've got two brains. Instead of just worrying about yourself, you're worrying about you and the dog is maybe assimilating things differently to you.
Yeah, CQB is complex and difficult anyway on your own. We have procedures and TTPs and things like tactics and that, but it's really being able to think and in the moment and adapt to what's happening in front of you. There's no real sort of, I guess, play sheet to follow when it comes to CQB. So and then to add a dog on your hip doing that, who is seeing things completely differently to you, it's hard. Yeah. It became quite challenging, and I know I had a lot of trouble with Kenny, especially on my hip, and he would, if we were sort of moving through a hallway or a room, and he would associate a room with a bite because that's where he always got a bite, was in a room, and he would dart off, and then pull me off balance, and so there was a lot of training we had to do there just to move through a compound or a house with the dog at heel.
Sure.
For example, that was a challenge in itself.
Yeah.
Because we always did like searches and off lead, and they would go into rooms and get bites, and then they associated a doorway with there's a bite in there. So then you had to sort of train that out of them as well.
Yep.
So there was, and that's just one small example of the difficulties we faced when doing CGB with a dog. Yeah.
Yeah, because obviously you're in a team. Does the team understand, or are they just going, hey, you keep up or you're gone kind of thing? Like,
Yeah.
do they get it or not? Because they're not immersed in that world.
No.
They don't know.
No, they're not. And generally, I can say most people would understand and would be, sympathetic to it. Yeah, you got the odd one there who just sort of like fucking,
Yeah, of course.
sort it out or piss off.
Yep.
But generally, dogs are a good equaliser, and dogs are a good team, bringing team together. And as soon as you're attached to a team and they're like, oh, this is our dog, they sort of work together. And
Yep.
you're like, all right, we're going to do this cereal for the dog, so it's not going to be.
It's a dog-centric cereal. Yeah,
and that came down to the handler to explain it to the team. If the handler didn't explain it well to the team, it can get lost.
Yeah.
But if you explained it well and explained that, hey, this might be a little choreographed, this might be a little off what we normally do, but it's because of these benefits for the dog.
Yeah.
And I think 9 times out of 10 people 100%
Totally on board.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's good. So obviously you think about that, and that's providing a lot of pressure externally to you. So you're trying to learn how the dog works now out of a controlled atmosphere, and everyone's kind of putting, to a degree, there's a kind of pressure on you to keep up. Did you expect that, or did you just kind of sit back and go, holy shit, what have I got myself into?
Yeah, a bit of that. Yeah, a bit of because during the course it's all dog centric. Yeah. So it's all for the dog. And then when you go and do your first sort of run through or FMP, so you're or training exercise with the squadron, it's not about the dog. And you are just expected to keep up. And you are just, so all of a sudden now you drag your dog through this serial or through this training exercise and they get no outcome. And so, it could actually be degrading for the dog, what you've done. And so, to try and adjust to that and to try and, then learn that, hey, all right, not every time am I going to get an opportunity to reward the dog. Not every time I'm going to get an opportunity to train the dog, but I need to have things in my pocket. I need to have things where I can, reward the dog myself, or, try and do a little training activity amongst the squadron activity. Sure. Because, no one else is really thinking about that. Yeah.
But that would be, in itself, that would be very similar to on operations. So you might do operations where you might go all day without the dog getting anything, and then you would have to reward the dog, have something on your person to reward the dog at the end of the day. So it's not unfamiliar with what you would see operationally, hey?
No, and that's right. Yeah. It is. It's just it was just unfamiliar for myself from going from the course to the squadron. Yeah, it took some adjustment to go, hold on, well, I'm trying to train my dog here, and they go, well, I don't really care. You know, we've got a job to do, and fair enough. That's why we were there.
That's a machine.
Yeah. So I'm not saying we need to stop and train my dog. I'm just saying that my mentality was a bit like, I can't do anything unless it's positive for my dog, which was soon,
Squash,
yeah.
No, I get it. I get it. So before we move on, because eventually we're going to move on to you taking over a management role in the cell.
Yep.
But for now, let's stay with you being a handler. So let's talk about experiences with individuals or with dogs that kind of shaped who you are as a handler or who you are as a dog team. That's more to the point.
Yeah,
because it's got to be, I think of my time with you guys, and I felt obligated to rise to the level to give you guys everything you could have.
Yeah.
There's got to be people that you look up to. I look up to all you guys. You're an amazing group. How about you personally?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess first and foremost, I'd have to mention Fax again.
Yeah.
To say, obviously, he had a huge impact on my life and decisions I made because I wouldn't be here without him. So that was a major impact on my life. The other ones, the obvious ones, Sergeant J, a bit of the dog father of the regiment, kind of. He came in and kind of took the regiment from took the dog cell, took the capability to the next level, I guess, of professionalism and in terms of getting dogs deployed and overseas, and he's hands down probably the most experienced dog handler there is. Especially with Cougar. And we all know about Cougar with the
famous Dickens medal.
So, learning from him and having him, on OJT and then on course and then various other things. They're still really good mates with him now. Had a massive impact.
Yeah. There's so many dogs attached to him. I just don't want to make it about Cougar. So if with him, Quake is attached to him. Jacker is attached to him. Fax is attached to him. There's just so many. If ever the time comes when he decides to separate, he'll be the next guy on this podcast. He is one of those guys.
Yeah.
And not just as a dog handler or a dog trainer or a dog capability guy, but as an operator.
Yeah. No, definitely someone I sort of looked up to and was the pinnacle of, being an operator and a handler. Yeah. And again, like I've mentioned, Matt Hart, David Barclay, again, both them, massive impact, massive influence, and look up to them immensely. Mark Donaldson as well.
Yep.
So, I've been lucky to work with a lot of really good people. And then that's just on the operator front. And then, DLOs like yourself, Ben Gertz, David McKay, all RAF, DLOs, learnt so much and become really good mates with these guys. So, it's not only the operators but also DLO side of things as well.
Yeah. So
and look up, I do look up to you guys in the dog training space because that's I think that's an important aspect too as being a handler is to recognise and to go, I am a handler, not a trainer.
Yeah.
I need help with that side of things. So it's important to recognise that. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a pivotal role. Hey, I've seen guys come into that role that go, I know. And it's just not a good mix. Working in absolutes just doesn't work for dogs.
Nah.
You must be able to be malleable and kind of blend in with what's being worked and what's been taught. And I think you've been able to grab some great guys.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing with dogs as well. The difficulty with dogs, as opposed to any other specialty in the army. In the army, you always have a PAM or a manual that explains this is what you do in this case. Do this, do that, blah blah. Blah. It's all very rudimental and very explained and mechanical.
Yep.
But with dogs, we have a PAM. We have a training guide and that. But it's probably one of the only capabilities where there is no
hard and fast.
Yeah. And if you are applying a hard and fast, you're not going to get very far.
It just doesn't work.
So what you do with one dog is not going to work with the other dog, or what works with one handler is not going to work with another handler. So what you're taught on course, you might have to do the opposite.
Yeah.
So it's just such a unique capability that you need to be, a very open, adaptable and flexible in your mindset and have a real problem-solving mindset as opposed to a lot of the other capabilities which are just follow the bouncing ball.
Yeah.
So,
do you think, is that why maybe there's a little bit of a disconnect between the cell and the squadron because A, B, C, D doesn't really fit the picture?
For sure. You get you get the cell who's trying to over sort of oversight of all the training that's going on, and you do encourage sort of independent and flexible training and adaptive to what dogs you have and that. So naturally, you're going to get different training involved with different dogs and different squadrons. But yeah, it was difficult. There was certain philosophies that I think were sort of not hard and fast, but were sort of foundational, I guess. Like, follow these philosophies. Like, I'm not telling you how to do it, but here's the sort of left and right with these philosophies. Like,
you need to get this end state.
Yeah, and I think it's difficult on the cell to try and impart that to all the squadrons who are doing different things and trying to standardise what everyone's doing. It's really hard, and it was really difficult.
I bet. I just want to emphasise that, because it's just not this seamless. While it works really well, and we've seen it work really well operationally, it isn't this seamless beast between dog and military. It's something we constantly need to work at.
Yeah, for sure. And it's always evolving. Like as a dog handler, as a dog capability, you can't sort of rest on what you already know. You need to sort of be out there doing symposiums, doing the conferences, which, I love doing, but especially when they're in Cairns. But it's essential. You gotta be out there and seeing what's new and how other people are doing it. It's not to say that's how you should do it. It's just saying maybe take bits and pieces and adapt it to your program. But you need to be continually evolving, because dogs are continually changing. There's different ways of doing things, and no two dogs are the same.
Yeah. So is that why? So having spent time there, I can tell you that you guys were leagues above where the broader Australian working dog industry was. What is it that got you there? Like, is it that you took a bit from column A, a bit from column B? You didn't have a structured methodology. You just made it your own, what bits you wanted, or or is it just that you guys were a tier 1 unit? What is it that, like, because you were groundbreaking. There's no two ways about it. The stuff that you were doing, I had trouble seeing around the world, let alone in Australia. So
yeah, and I think it's a combination of sort of everything you mentioned. Like the tier 1 unit thing was, it just encourages that type of thinking. So being adaptive, thinking outside the box, not sort of settling on one way of doing things, that's just bread and butter for everyone in the regiment,
Yeah.
So that sort of came naturally to guys with the dogs as well. So there was that. And I think the fact that certain people who help elevate the capability, such as Sergeant J and, Matt Harts and the David Barclays and the Mark Donaldsons and all those, they acknowledge that in early days that, hey, there's no right or wrong. There's no sort of, this is the way you got to do it. You've got to adapt to the dog, to the situation, to what's happening in front of you. And I think that, and it was a bottom-up sort of driven capability, which I think is super important to understand.
Yes.
Is it was driven from the bottom up, which means that kind of mentality was supported and was encouraged.
Yeah.
There was no like, this is the right way to do things. If you don't do it this way, you fail.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that kind of culture and mentality in the dog community was encouraged.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that's what allowed us to achieve what we did. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we'll take a quick break and we'll be back.
When the long surf caps off the day in Margs, or the sand on your feet fills your mate's car. When Kwinana Freeway dries your hair and puts you to sleep with humid air. When you draw with sunscreen on your best mate's back and accept your fate a red hard smack. When you tie your bathers in double knot, there can only be one upshot. Upshot whiskey, distilled in WA for the perfect summer day.
139 Kensington Street. Come down, check it out.
It is
Local
amazing.
East Perth Distillery.
Very nice, very nice. All right. You're kind of a bit advanced on where the rest of Australia was because you didn't lock into any kind of methodology. You kind of took what worked for you guys and what didn't. To your benefit, you're able to proof that on operations, which
Correct.
major plus right there.
Yeah.
Which I think, let's not overlook that. I think one of the RAF's biggest problems was we weren't able to prove things operationally. So we lean towards like a training tempo, not an operational tempo.
For sure. And, without getting too deep into some of the specifics about what happened overseas and that, but there were certain things that happened, on operation where were a distinct result of training mechanisms or the way we trained the dogs. And, so you would see it out on the job and then be like, okay, well, that didn't work. We need to come back now and retrain that. So, and the enemy as well was they were adapting as they went as well. They knew we were using dogs, so they were using certain things to, combat the dog, and so we had to train against that as well. So it was a constant back and forth. Yeah.
It's the most exciting thing for me as a DLO was how it kept evolving. So we would teach something and then handlers would come back and go, no, well, actually we saw this. And so we would have to evolve to something else. For me as a trainer, just purely from a training perspective, that was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's enough of that. We'll tie that in a bow. We're all done with that. So you've done your time, you've done your course, you've done your time as a handler. In that time, Dave Barclay has moved out of being the lead handler.
Yep.
And is now in charge of the cell.
Yep.
And Matt Hart is now lead handler.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then you've done your time as a handler there. And then what's the progression from there? What happened from there?
Yeah. And then, again, Matt, I think once he'd done his time as lead handler, then he went into the cell as 2IC.
Yep.
And
with Dave.
With
running
Dave.
the show.
Yeah.
Yep.
As he was in charge of the cell.
Yep.
And then I, was the lead handler in 3 Squadron for a period. And, and then I started to get a sort of respect of how difficult it was to, manage multiple dog teams, and manage, not only down but up as well. So with limited capacity, because to be honest, it was kind of like a self-imposed progression from the dog cell was, you're junior handler, you're senior handler, but and what worked really well, it wasn't always recognised universally with everyone. Sure. But that's the way we did it with the dogs, and we had our own little community almost, but so, even though I was, I'm senior handler and I'm here to voice, look after all the dogs in the squadron, not a lot of people it wasn't often recognised. Yeah.
How did that go? So let's just quickly touch on that. So you're a handler and it's kind of free, hair's blowing in the wind, you're loving life. All you got to worry about is you and the dog, and now you're lead handler and you're worrying about your team.
Yeah, and that's the I guess the problem was we weren't actually a team. So everyone, the different troops or in different teams, and it was hard you're responsible for that capability, but spread across different teams. And we would come together and there was no other sort of specialisation that worked as closely as the dogs, I believe, the dog cell and, the dog community in a squadron and in a regiment sense as well. So I have really good mates from all different squadrons purely because of the dogs. Yeah. It just really brings you all together. But talking about being senior handler in a squadron, Yeah, it was difficult because you're trying to, advocate for a dog team, and might be in a different troop, might be, someone completely dislocated from your sort of chain of command. And, you're trying to say, oh, we need time to train, we need time to do this, or that's not a good way to do it. And they sort of, there was a lot of, from the leadership, sort of like, well, we don't care. Basically, who are you? Because it wasn't really a recognised position. But that's a little, that wasn't always the case.
Yeah.
There was obviously people who obviously pushed it and supported it too. A lot of the troop sergeants, especially. A lot of the guys who had been there and seen
That's seen it work.
it work. It was mainly the officers come through that didn't have that experience, and it wasn't their fault or anything. It was just that they hadn't experienced that the value of that capability and how it sort of worked within the troop or squadron. So it was difficult, and typically, I found that quite a challenging period of my career as a senior handler, because I sort of wanted to, take responsibility and progress the capability in the squadron, but just really didn't have the say, I guess.
Yeah.
In the squadron.
So you're kind of like the buffer between the squadron and the dog teams, as to you're trying to keep everyone happy. You're trying to keep dog teams happy. You're trying to keep the squadron happy. And that, I'm guessing that could put you in a pretty awkward position sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I learned a lot from guys like Matt Hart, who he wasn't shy to, voice his opinion. Same as Dave.
Well, neither was Dave.
Dave Barclay.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot from them. But unfortunately, personally, I wasn't as, I guess, strong as those guys in terms of voicing my opinion. I don't think I achieved what I kind of wanted to as a senior dog handler. And I think it was obviously mostly it was due to my sort of lack of experience, lack of leadership, I guess, at the time. And
what time period are we talking from handler to lead handler?
Oh, probably three years.
Yeah. And in the wider dog community, 3 years is just when you're beginning to know how your dog works.
Exactly, right. But and I mean, I can look back retrospectively now, and I think I made a few mistakes and, pissed off a few people that I shouldn't have, and, probably should have voiced my opinion when I didn't, and probably voiced my opinion when I shouldn't have. And that was kind of my introduction to, I guess, the politics behind it all. Yeah, I don't think I handled it as the best I could have, but that's lessons learned. That's why you do it. You learn.
You're in the hot seat.
Yeah. So, and it definitely, I learned a lot from that, which set me up well when I did go to the cell.
Sure.
Yeah.
Did you have support from the cell, or was it very much they were detached from the squadron kind of perspective?
Yeah, it was a difficult time. We had the support of the cell, because I believe, Dave was up there and 100% had his support.
Yep.
And then eventually when Matt went up there, 100% had his support, did everything he could. But there's only so much they could do.
Sure.
Yeah. So had their support, but influence was minimal in the squadron. Yeah.
Yeah. So you spent your time as a lead handler. Anything more you want to talk about as a lead handler? Obviously, you learn a lot of maybe what you didn't want to learn.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was a bit of trial by error.
Yeah.
That period in my life, which I think's super important to do.
And we learn.
Look back and retrospectively and go, could have done that better.
Yeah.
So that, and I'm continually doing that with everything I do. But that period especially, I think there was, definitely moments where I could have probably achieved more if I handled myself a little better. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. All right. So then we get to that period. So you got Dave in the cell, Matt in the cell, and then it comes time for a transition, as it does with anything military. Just so everyone outside the military world knows that, unlike the police, where you can kind of stay there for a very long period of time, or corrections or whatever. Military is very different. So you do it an allotted amount of time, and then you must move on, and then you have your successor. So lead handler, what happens from there?
Yeah, and I was approached by Matt Hart again, and said, he's moving on from the 2IC back to the Squadron. Did I want to take that role? And again, like, I have to emphasize, this capability is all bottom driven. So we talked to each other, we decided who's going where, and then advised up, this is what's happening. I mean, even though they eventually they would pretend it was their decision.
Sure. Hey, that's how military works. And I'll be honest, that's why you guys work so well, is because it's bottom driven. You know what's going on the ground, so you can make rational, sound decisions.
Yeah, and I'll have to also caveat, I mean, it sounds like I'm sort of, banging on about the leadership and how, but they 90% of the time as well, they were the ones who recognised that it was bottom up and supported it, and took on our advice, basically. So, it's all fun and well to say it's a bottom driven capability, but unless you have leadership that recognises that and supports it, it's not going to get anywhere. So there, generally speaking, we had leadership that recognised that. I may come across as a little harsh on the leadership,
Sure.
It's definitely not, generally speaking, though, they have a deep respect for, a bottom-driven capability.
Yep.
And they're the ones who facilitate it. Because, like I said, without a leadership that allows it and facilitates it, it doesn't matter. It's not going to happen. So, a lot of credit needs to go to them as well. But
yeah, sure.
But
you are a trooper, so you will smash on.
I was a soldier.
Yes.
So I need to, voice my opinion about officers.
Correct. That's community wide. That's worldwide. So yeah. All right. So moving on to you as 2IC of the cell.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. So like I said, I was sort of approached by Matt Hart, and we sort of teed it up that I would take over from him. So we did a handover, took over. Dave was in the sergeant seat. Yep. So perfect. We all knew each other. A bit of the 3 Squadron mafia, as they say.
Yeah.
But the first thing I learnt in that role was you can't please everyone.
Welcome.
And I think that's any person in a managerial role will understand. And especially with dogs, because dogs was so emotive. It was so driven by emotion, and you became so protective of your dog or your capability in your squadron. And when someone from the cell was trying to tell you how to train your dog, it would
great.
Yeah, it would fire up some emotions, right? So it had some really emotive discussions, I suppose, with certain people who in different squadrons who just saying like, it's, bullshit, we shouldn't be doing it like that, like, blah, blah. And so that was challenging to be in a position where, in your mind, you're trying to do the right thing, but, you just can't please everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that must be difficult. You're coming from a handler, coming through the squadrons. You would have had a certain perception, and then you get into the cell, and you're looking basically back the other way.
Yeah, for sure. So now I'm, trying to, whilst I was in the squadron, happy to do things my way.
Yep.
And now in the cell trying to say, all right, whilst I'm not telling you how to do things, I'm saying this is probably left and right of arc, and this is like the methodologies and the philosophies we should use. And it was difficult. There was people who were, yep, on board, and there was people who were totally not on board.
Sure.
And I guess, and these are people who are not afraid to tell you they're not on board.
No, you're talking alpha person.
Yeah, so, with that, and I learned a lot in that period as well. I still think that 2 years I spent in the dog cell was really...
In the 2IC role?
Yeah, was really, really important in shaping sort of who I am now and in managerial sense, so to speak, in managing people more than dogs, because the dogs were the easy part in the dog cell. Funny enough, it was the people that were hard to manage. But I learned a lot, and I really do think it was a big step from out of the squadron into the 2IC and of the cell, and I just loved every minute of it. It was great, yeah.
Awesome. So let's talk about that on one of those points you just brought up was, so you're dealing with people, but on the flip side of that, because I saw you in that role, you were also dealing with development dogs.
Oh, yeah.
Totally act the human side of things, and all dogs, doesn't matter where it is. It could be in Australia, it could be in America, it could be in Europe, wherever. Dogs are super emotive. Dog cells are super emotive, not dogs.
Nah.
And handlers are dramatic.
Yeah, for sure.
Way.
Yeah.
But let's lean on the other side of it, which was you are controlling the development side of the cell.
Matt did some really good work with some of the young development dogs coming through, really driven, really, passionate about it.
That was kind of new, hey?
A lot of knowledge. Yeah.
It hadn't really been done. I know Sergeant Jay had kind of delved in that world, but it wasn't the given.
No. And so all of a sudden I've taken over, and really quickly I've realised, I'm sort of lacking a bit in the development phase.
Which is understandable because you come on as a handler. The dog is already at a certain stage when he gets handed to you.
For sure. So I realised really quick that I was a bit out of my depth with developing dogs. And I'm not afraid to admit that. That's something that I'd never had a lot of experience with, and I contacted yourself a lot to be like, hey, I really am out of my depth here with developing these dogs. So with that, I sort of recognised that I wasn't going to be able to achieve what was best for the cell in if I was developing them. So then decided to outsource that with you guys who were...
Yeah, hey, not hiding anything. That's the market that Canine Solutions we were aiming towards. And so you kind of grabbed hold of that. But you were getting pulled every which way. So, and I'd seen it with Sergeant Jay, and I'd seen it with Matt and Dave, that you were trying to run a capability plus develop dogs.
Yeah.
And there just wasn't enough hours in the day for it all.
No, I kind of saw my ability to value add was with the handlers.
Yep.
Being a handler for like 4 years, that was where I could value add, was help the different squadron handlers and help them in terms of handling their dogs. Training wise and developing, well, that was not something I'd been exposed to, and that was more the DLO side of things.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to just focus on training handlers and setting up serials for handlers and facilitating what they wanted to do for their training, and also, introducing new and going on all these conferences that I'm talking about, and which
No, it's important.
I do, in Cairns or whatever they were. It's not my fault they're running Cairns. I'm just saying, but so and then bring that back to the cell, and then trying to explain that to the handlers.
That have been through in a certain way.
Yeah.
Plus, I think you're kind of underselling it a lot. Like, you were doing assessments, and no brainer to everyone out there, even mad SAS guys need to do assessments. They need to pass the validations, and you're kind of running all that. So you're running new training, validations, dev dogs, general cell running, man.
Yeah, I mean, and not taking away as well from, there was two of us, obviously the sergeant,
Sure.
Dave, and then another guy after him.
Probably needed to be about 6 here, but...
Yeah. But yeah, for sure. It was a lot of work, but it was super rewarding, and it was good fun. Trying to come up with new ideas and new places to train, and it just really depended on especially leadership as well, who supported you. If you had good supporters up higher, then you could really achieve a lot.
Yep.
And set up a lot. But one of the biggest challenges in the cell was I put a lot of, and Matt would agree to this, Dave would agree, everyone. You put in so much effort to organise, say, a validation or a training exercise, and it could be wherever you've organised it, interstate or
Sure.
whatever. But getting guys to commit to it was super difficult.
Getting squadrons to commit.
Well,
to it.
the guys wanted to do
Yeah.
it. The guys were keen.
Yeah.
Getting the time off to do it.
Yeah.
So, we as a cell, we were sort of setting our own standards that we needed to meet, but it wasn't really supported a lot by the squadron, so to speak.
Sure.
So we were saying you had to validate twice a year.
Yep.
To remain operational. But that wasn't, again, like the positions we established in the squadron as junior and senior handler. It's kind of self-driven, but it wasn't kind of universally accepted.
Yeah.
So it was difficult to say.
Nothing on paper.
Yeah. But Sergeant, and again, this is why everyone refers to Sergeant J as a dog father. He's the guy who set the standard.
He really did set the standard.
And so, we. When I got into the cell, it's kind of like, you're just sort of building on what he developed, and then you're building on what sort of Matt and Dave sort of developed. But
that is kind of how it works, though.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you progress on what they have built.
Yeah,
that's how it works,
and it worked really well. So, I'm not denying that the cell from when it established to where it is, the evolution it went through was really good.
Yeah.
And really, everybody that was involved, took on what was already there and then built on it and made sure the place was better than when they left.
We'll have a break and then we'll come back.
In the last and final episode of Verta's House Kennel Cast, Ryan talks about going from squadron handler to managerial roles within the cell, innovation within the dog training space, and transitioning from elite soldiering to civilian life.